Now let's once again consider our problem with progressive income tax. Let us again recall what happened there. We had a income of $3,200. If the income was below $2,000, the person paid $0 in taxes. If the income was between $2,000 and $2,500, let's say $2,200, then the sum that was above $2,000, the $200, was taxed with 20%. If the sum was between $2,500 and $3,000, let's say $2,800, then what was between $2,000 and $2,500 was taxed with 20%, and the remaining $300 was taxed with 40%. If the income was bigger, the biggest option above 3,000, like our 3,200, then what was between 2 and 2,500 was 20% taxable. What was between 2,500 and 3,000 was 40% taxable, and the remaining 200 that we have over 3,000 was taxed with 60%. For calculating it, we actually calculated something called entire first, which is this 20% of the 500 that's between 2,000 and 2,500. And we calculated the entire second, which was the 40% of the range for 2,500 to 3,000. So the first was 100, the entire second was 200. So for instance, if we're taxing the 3,200, we take the entire first, which is 100, entire second, which is 200, and we add to it our 200, which is over 3,000, the 200 with 60%. 60% of 200 is 120, and 100, 200, and 120 together give us 420. So that's how the calculation goes. Again, you don't have to remember the details, and you can always go back to the exercise. But here is the formula. It was 1, 2, 3 ifs within each other. Remember that the system was such that if we have two options below 2,000 and between 2 and 2,500, if we have two options, there's one if. But we had 1, 2, 3, 4 options, and for 4 options we need 3 ifs. 4 options, 3 ifs, 3 options, 2 ifs, 2 options, 1 if. So that's how it went. Okay, but now what is of interest for us, let's calculate one new thing in here. What's of interest for us is something we could call effective tax rate. Let's write it. Equals 420, which is C10, divided by C4. C10 divided by C4, and here it is. This number, 420 divided by 3,200. Let's turn it into a percentage. It's actually a percentage. So let's click on Control 1, and let's say that it's a percentage. As we see, this is 13%, and it shows us that if with an income of 3,200 we're paying 420 all in taxes, then actually our tax percentage is 13,13. So it's just above 10% of the total sum. This could be called effective tax rate. Now let's start calculating these. The first scenario analysis we're going to do is we're going to change our income from 1,500 to 4,000, and we're going to see what happens to the taxes. So we write 1,500, 1,600, and we copy it until, yeah, we can just let it go until 4,000. I have to zoom out here. Remember that if we want to zoom out in Microsoft Excel, we have to hold Control and mouse wheel. Control and mouse wheel. So here it is. And now let's bring out the tax amount. So these here are all going to be our incomes. Go in here. And we want to see what happens to taxes. Equals C10. Now let's run the data table. We select the entire table. We do data, what if analysis, data table. These are here in a column, so they're called column input cell. And these column input cells, these all go into our income. Okay, and then let's click OK. And here we see these are the tax amounts in case our income is such. Now, as we see, until 2000 we pay no taxes. Then we pay a little and more. And now this is also going to be a scatter graph, because it has x-axis contains the income values and y-axis contains the sum we pay as taxes. And now we select them together, and we do a insert scatter graph. Okay, and here it is. Now let's delete the series 1 in here again. Let's make this scatter graph really rather big. And what we see here is that this graph goes higher, and is steeper and steeper and steeper. It gets higher more and more quickly. And how does that happen? Until 2000, 0 taxes. From 2500, the taxes will become higher. From 3000, even higher. And this is how this line gets steeper and steeper. The reason is that, for instance, from 3000, with every krone that is added, is actually taxed. Every dollar that is added is actually taxed with 60%. So every time we add another dollar, the last dollar that we add is taxed at 60%. The first dollars that we already had until 3000 were taxed with lower percentages, but the new additional dollar is taxed with 60%. That's why actually this line gets higher so quickly here. Let's calculate this effective tax rate as well. We just do equals taxes divided by income. Taxes divided by income. Let's copy this, and here it is. Let's turn it into a percentage as well. This was taxes divided by income. Let's copy this. Let's select it all. Let's press Ctrl 1 and turn it into a percentage. And here it is. With income as low as 2,100, and as we're paying for the first 100 just 20%, so if the income is 2,100, the taxes are as low as 20%. The 20% for the first 100. Our effective tax rate is as low as 0.95%. And even if our income is 4,000, our effective tax rate hasn't risen to more than just 22.5%. But of course, if our income was, let's say, 4 million, then basically all of our income would be taxed with that highest 60%. And we could venture a guess that the effective tax rate in that case would be almost exactly 60%. Because everything above 3,000, from 3,000 to our 3 million or 4 million, is all going to be taxed at 60%. So this first amount is minuscule, and it's almost all taxed at 60%. And we could guess that the effective tax rate would be almost 60%. Now, once again, if our income is, let's say, 3,000, our effective tax rate is 10%. But now every dollar that is added is taxed with 60%, which means that this is the rate at which the taxes get higher is now quicker than it used to be. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is, our income is 3,200 and we're paying as taxes 420. Let's say that we have such a scenario. In the US, we're considering a raise in the tax percentage for the highest bracket, which means that the 60% is going to get higher. And now what we want to know is, how high can they make the highest tax percentage for us not to be paying no more than 450? Remember, if we pay 450, we still will have 3,200 minus 450 equals 2,750. So we still want to have at least 2,750. Then our taxes may not be higher than 450 if we want to have that sum. And this means that we want to know how much can they make the higher tax percentage higher for us not to be paying more than 450 still. So that's a goal-seek problem. Data, what-if analysis, goal-seek. Now our taxes is the goal, and we will set it to 450. Taxes will go to 450. Once again, this contains a formula. We can't write a 450 in there, but we can change the cell 60%. And we will change it, click OK, and here it is. It turns out they can even raise the taxes to 75%, and we'll still be paying only 450 as taxes, and we will have 2,750 remaining. Well, this almost happens in Sweden, so 75% is not ever seen. Okay, let's put 60% back in here, but this was our exercise. Okay, so a little bit of a scenario analysis with taxes.